Here is a rundown on the subtle art of being authentic. Not Everyone Should Like You, featuring Mark Manson by Lewis Howes. He's been creating content for 15 years, but has recently focused on making deeper, more psychologically insightful videos on YouTube. Lewis Howes asks Mark about the psychological skills humans should master to achieve more peace and abundance in their lives.
Mark says the first skill is self-awareness, which is tricky to develop because we're good at tricking and deluding ourselves. He explains that self-awareness involves questioning our own assumptions and motivations, and being able to sit with uncomfortable feelings. Mark shares that he used to be avoidant in his relationships, but has worked on developing self-awareness and now has a more harmonious marriage. He says that one of the biggest things he's learned is not feeling compelled to change his partner, but rather accepting and loving them for who they are. Mark also talks about the importance of feedback and how it can be scary to receive, but ultimately helpful for personal growth. He suggests that people should ask themselves if they're truly being self-aware or just being a jerk, and that they should seek out people who can give them honest feedback.
Lewis Howes shares his own experience with receiving feedback, saying that he used to take it personally and get defensive, but has since learned to see it as an opportunity for growth.
Mark notes that emotional skills are domain-specific, and that people can be emotional geniuses in one area of their life, but struggle in another. He also talks about how he used to struggle with social anxiety and would write provocative articles to get attention, but would then be nervous in social settings. Mark says that he's better at writing than in-person interactions, and that he's accumulated evidence over the years that his writing is well received. He doesn't take it personally, but rather uses it as an opportunity to grow. He thinks that knowing when to take feedback and when to ignore it is a skill that requires wisdom and consideration. Mark Manson also believes that people should be careful about who they take advice from, and that they shouldn't care about criticism from people they wouldn't ask for advice. Mark Manson shares that he's bad at reaching out to people and staying connected, and that it's a skill he's still working on. He thinks that it's a combination of being busy and having social anxiety.
Lewis Howes, on the other hand, has the opposite problem. He used to be too connected with everyone and had to learn to set boundaries. He thinks that self-awareness is the first step to developing this skill, and that it's okay to say no to people and create boundaries. Mark Manson and Lewis Howes discuss how they've both struggled with social skills, and that it's either emotional or psychological wounds that hold people back. They agree that developing these skills can bring peace and freedom. Lewis Howes thinks that the quantity of social relationships can compensate for the lack of depth, and that he used to try to go deep with people too quickly.
Mark shares that having a strong sense of identity and values can actually help you stand out and attract people who share similar beliefs. Mark emphasizes the importance of self-awareness, feedback, and communication in building strong relationships. He shares that communicating effectively with people means distinguishing between comments about a person's thoughts or actions versus the person themselves. This means maintaining respect for the person while disagreeing about the idea. Mark also talks about his experience with therapy, which helped him realize that his childhood was not normal and that he had unresolved trauma. He notes that therapy helped him develop self-awareness and understand that his parents' behavior was not his fault.
Lewis asks Mark about the advice in the self-help world that he thinks people should ignore.
Mark mentions that narcissism is often overrated and that people use it as an excuse to exit difficult situations and relationships. He also notes that manifestation is often explained poorly, and that it's not about the universe conspiring to give you what you want, but rather about leveraging cognitive bias to focus on your goals. Mark shares that he's a science nerd and prefers to call manifestation leveraging cognitive bias. He notes that when you focus on a goal, you start noticing opportunities and things that can help you achieve it, but that these things were always there. You just weren't paying attention to them.
Lewis and Mark agree that the intention and action are what matter, regardless of what you call it.
Mark notes that bad explanations can lead to poor assumptions, and that it's essential to have a clear understanding of what works and what doesn't. Mark reflects on what skill he needs to master for the next 4 years of his life. He notes that he's happy and abundant, but that he's still working on figuring out what's next. He's figured out a lot of his personal issues and is in a good place. However, he notes that this has taken away some of the fire and edge that drove him to create passionate content in the past.
Lewis Howes suggests that this might be because Mark is now peaceful and happy, and doesn't need to get angry about things to fuel his creativity.
Mark agrees, saying that he's enjoying life and doesn't feel the need to prove himself or conquer more. He's got business goals, but they're fun and not driven by a need to prove anything. He's also got personal goals, but they're not about winning or achieving something, just about being good for himself and those around him. Mark hopes he can stay in this place and not get sucked into chasing after something that's not truly important.
Lewis notes that this is a skill that not many people have and that there is a season for it. When you're young and trying to develop your talents and skills, you need to work hard and overcome challenges. But as you get older, you can reach a point where you feel like you've done enough and you're enough. Lewis quotes Jim Carrey, who said that he's done enough and he's enough, and that's a powerful feeling.
Mark agrees, saying that having enough is the best definition of success. He's not naive, but he feels like a lot of older folks reach this place naturally. He's not quite there, but he's closer than he's ever been. As long as nothing deteriorates, he feels like he's won already.
Lewis notes that having peace with where you're at is key, and that suffering is not being happy with what you have.
Mark agrees, saying that there are people who have a lot but aren't happy, and that's not peace.
Lewis says that even if he had all the money in the world, he'd still want to pursue things, but not out of a need to prove himself, just because it would serve people and himself.
Mark says that the key is to flip it around and focus on serving others. When you're young, you want to prove yourself, but once you feel like you have enough, you want to give back and help others.
Lewis notes that Mark is doing this in a big way with his YouTube series and podcast, where he shares psychological skills and mindsets. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, and just remember, subscription is only £1 or $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening.